Pleasant good afternoon to all of you out there in in virtual land. It's always an absolute pleasure to join you on these nice and quiet Sundays to share a few words and talk about progress in our country. It is my disposition and my view that we are at a critical point in our nation's history, at a point particularly for folks from my generation, those who are 40 years old and above. We are at the point where um, we feel young, but we're not so young. But we're also staring at a place where you see yourself getting older and older. And so you continue now to think not just about your own personal aggrandizement, as they say, but you now start to think about, but what about the country? But what about the future? But what are we bequeathing to the generation coming after us? What are we bequeathing to our children? I mean, if you are within that age range as myself, 40s, mid 40s and above, and you're not thinking that way, then I don't know what is there to think about. On a personal level, these days, wake up in the morning and I go into the bathroom, I look myself in the mirror, and I see that at least 50% of the hair on my head has gone gray. That is a constant reminder for me of my own mortality, of the fact that at some point, whether we like it or not, we're going to die. And we're going to die, and in a matter of time, you will be a footnote to history, maybe a very celebrated footnote, or maybe one that may be forgotten rather than remembered vividly. But whatever the case, as the philosophers say, from dust to dust, eventually you die and you become part of the earth. So you go. And the reason I'm starting off on this note, I mean, at some point we'll come to the key talking points, some of the things we need and we want to cover, but gradually we're going to get there. But the reason I start on this note of personal mortality, which can be extrapolated, to just about anybody, is that it raises the question of national disposition. What do we really want for our country? What should we really want for our country? There's one man I respect a whole lot, even though he's passed, but I still use the word respect. And that man was my late father, Bai Gbala. You may fault him on anything, but one of the things you will never fault Bai Gbala on was his abiding conviction in love for the country, in patriotism. And if there's anything I got out of him, aside from genetically looking like him to a larger extent, but beyond that, his quest for learning and the importance of, education and public service, if there's anything else I got from him, was this feeling that one's existence is bigger than self. And one's existence, though we all want the best in life, we want to have a decent place to live, we want to have freedom from want, we want to enjoy life, we want our children to be well. But one of the things you get from, growing up with Bai Gbala and listening to him and understanding his personal philosophy, this man who was born in Mangertown, Grand Jeddah County, clawed his way through life, lived with some families Americo-Liberian families in Bassa, and then in Monrovia in order to get a head start. Eventually won a scholarship, academic scholarship, to go to the US and study engineering, and then dovetailed into politics and all of these things, working at Lamco and others during those days. But if one thing you get from living and benefiting from Bai Gbala's philosophy is that nationalistic fervor, that idea that you have to be passionate about your country. Liberia may not be the best country in the world. It may not be the wealthiest. It may not be the most developed. It may not have the skyscraper and the shopping malls. It may be occupied by slums and there's poverty, but it is our Liberia. It is where we come from. It is our home. It is where we call home. And there will be no other home except Liberia for us. And those of us who come from outside of Monrovia, me particularly, having my origins in Grand Jeddah County and Nimba County for that matter, because my late mother hailed from Nimba, particularly from Towai Town, and my father from Grand Jeddah. This is always going to be home, and we can find nothing better than that. We may travel the world, see all of the finer things, be exposed to grandeur and grandiosity, but ultimately, Liberia is our home. And the reason I start on this note is because, like I said, we are at a point in time where we're staring our own impending mortality, even though it is still a bit delayed because we still have some time. The Bible says 70, but we're getting there. And when you start to get there, you want to be in a position now to start to think about the country. What can we do for a country? And that is why I and others commence on this path of the centrism movement, where we've made it our business to say, look, we don't have to be a part of those who are the actual leaders of the country or the political party that, powers the country, that makes the decisions of the country, that occupies the key positions of the country. We don't have to be a part of that. But our orientation is that it cannot be all negative. It cannot be all bad. This country, you can say that nothing positive is happening in the country. And I refuse to be pulled into that situation. To be pulled into a situation where I must condemn everything because politically it aligns with where I find myself identifying by political association. I refuse to be drawn into that, at least at this point in my life, having been involved now with party politics, even though I don't see myself as a politician, but having been involved with party politics for this length of time, I don't see myself doing that. And I'm happy to see there is a growing population of young people who also are beginning to espouse the same views, that it is not about the political orientation. It is about the country. And we have to be our own trumpeters of progress if we want the country to move forward. Proclaiming doomsday simply because you don't have a political position is not going to help the country. It is only by taking altruistic positions that reflect a deep and abiding love and faith in your country, that we can move this country forward. And that's the disposition I've taken. There are quite a few things to talk about because where we are now, because of the political polarization in our country, you find that it's either those who are for or those who are against. And nobody wants to celebrate anything. And I've said to those who will listen, I told when I was fortunate, I call it fortunate and privileged because it's not a right. It's not every day that anyone, Tom, Dick, or Harry gets the opportunity to see and meet the President of the Republic. But I got that opportunity about a month or so back. And up to today's date, I still talk about my impression, though brief that opportunity was. I don't think we spent more than an hour with him because, I mean, we spoke for maybe 15 minutes. And then the other 15 minutes, he offered us food. And I went and I ate, of course. Who am I to refuse food for the president, especially when I was hungry? We had traveled to Bomi. No. I mean, I went and ate. But let's say a maximum of 30 minutes in his presence, 30 to 45 minutes. But I left that meeting, as I have repeated and recounted to anybody who's had the chance to listen to me. I left that meeting profoundly convinced, for whatever reasons, call it by intuition, call it by introspection, call it by instinct, whatever way you want to describe it, go ahead and describe it. But I left that meeting profoundly convinced that the president means well for this country, means well for Liberia. That's my disposition. That's how I left there. What he spoke about, how he spoke about it, coupled with the fact that the things he mentioned, and I'm the first to always say, my history is documented. It's not so very far away. Just, a couple of years ago in 2023, I was national campaign spokesperson of the CDC. And in that role, I led the verbal charge of holding Vice President Weah to account for his public service experience. I argued that in various quarters. And my argument was solely that I believe President Weah will do better. And that on the records of what President Weah have been able to do, and that is not to say there weren't faults with the leadership of the country under President Weah. I mean, no government is faultless. Same thing we're seeing today with President Weah. There are some faults. So no government is ever faultless. So I led that charge, championing the re-election of President Weah. The Liberian people spoke. 20,000 or so of our countrymen and women decided it was time for a change, that they did not want President Weah and they did not want the CDC and would rather have President Weah lead. And as a true Democrat, I accepted those results and committed myself to working for the country going forward, not to be deterred or distracted based on party politics. And so here was I, having now the opportunity. If it was some people who were vindictive, some people who harbor malice, some people who, as we say in Liberia, bear grudge, the minute my name was mentioned to the president in order to sit down and have a meeting, he wouldn't have even entertained it. He wouldn't have even had the conversation. In fact, I'm sure he would have said to the interlocutor who arranged the meeting, say, look, I'm not going to meet the young man. I mean, of course, I know of him. I know his background. I'm sure he's a sound young person. But look at the role he played when I wanted to be president and I was fighting to convince the Liberian people that I was better placed to lead. He was the one on the other side convincing the Liberian people not to vote for me. Therefore, I don't think I should sit with him. I don't think I should see him. And he would have been perfectly within his rights, especially given how petty and political we are in Liberia. The president would have been perfectly within his rights to decide not to see me. But irrespective of that history and everything else, the president agreed to see me. I was surprised. Even up to the last moment, first when the meeting was confirmed, and I was informed that we'll go and see the president. I said, well, I called my wife and I told her, I said, there is a meeting pending to see the president, so my fingers are crossed, and I'll wait to see what happens. And the day finally came, I was further informed that the meeting was confirmed. It was announced on the same day, and the president was still there, consistent that he would see me, Kanio Bai Gbala, who led the charge against his election as president. He said he would sit with me. Even before arriving to see him, just by that mere fact that he even agreed as we were in the car going along. I didn't tell the other colleagues who and I were driving together going, because we talk about everything else on the road to bombing, then the meeting itself. But I kept thinking to myself, is it really possible that President Weah has agreed to see me and we're going to see him? And we traveled there. We got there. The protocol announced that I was a part of the team, and we were ushered to see the president. And we sat down with him. And he spoke as usual. He spoke to me. He also spoke to others. But one thing that came out in that conversation was he spoke about respect and how he wants to change the country. And I sat there. The only thing I could say to myself is that, Mr. President, portfolio or not, in whatever way we can work to ensure that your government succeeds, we will do so. And since I left the presence of the president, it has been my abiding conviction and purpose to continuously amplify that which is positive about his leadership and about his government. To the chagrin of most of those who have taken it upon themselves to just remain in political frame and to criticize everything that happens in the country. I wouldn't do that. And I've decided I won't do that. And therefore, that's why I've come under a lot of pressure these days. Just a few hours ago, somebody else telling me you must resign from the party, from the CDC. So I challenged them. I said, look, show me the regulations of the party, the constitutional provisions of the party that say that if there is a positive happening in my country and I support the current president of the country who does not belong to my party, that I cannot amplify it and therefore I am derelict to my party. Show me that provision. And I know that is because it's a threat. But I'm not going to listen to that. I'm not going to be sidetracked by that because I have a purpose and a mission. And that mission is, while President Boyka is president, he has my 1,000% commitment in whatever small way, no matter what the sector may be, to showcase what is positive about our country. People keep arguing. Nothing is happening. Nothing is happening in the country. That is so far from the truth. And we must take a position to continuously inform our people about what is happening. Information is so key and so strategic. It is the lifeblood of any democracy. Because even though things are happening and they're changing, if you are not consistently communicating it in an accessible way to the population, they get to a point where they start to think nothing is changing. And then desperation sets in, and then they can be manipulated by nefarious actors. You don't want that. So in my no position role, lack of position role, because most of the folks, when I post good, what is happening in the country, somebody says, you assume you keep doing this, you're not going to get appointed. Look, whether I get appointed or not is immaterial. What is material and important is that good things are happening in our country, and we must communicate that void of political alliances. And that is what I'm doing. And so when people keep saying nothing has happened, I said, no, that's not true. A lot is happening. And just with a little bit of research, I've begun to unearth and to proclaim to our people all the good things that are happening under President Boyka. Today, there are a few things to cover that I'd like to cover. And in terms of the good things that are happening in our country, because for me, I am going to be a messenger of good things, a bearer of good news. I've told the people my role is not to antagonize or insult or criticize anyone. No, that's not my role. Even though if you come for me, you can rest assured the full might, my full intellectual might will be mustered against you, and I'll come for you as well. But if you just leave me alone, my role is going to be a bearer of good tidings, informing the people of what is positive and what has happened in our country. And so today I'll single out just 3 or 4 things that have changed just over the last week in our country that are massive in terms of the developmental impact it will have in the next 3 to 4 years. When people keep arguing, where's the new investment? Where are the new changes? These are the things that we must communicate to our people, and that is what we're doing. And then I'll talk about these things, and then I will end by addressing a few things raised by my own brother, Henry Costa, in his most recent podcast. I will end by addressing those things and responding to some of those things. And I will end by giving him my own cautionary advice as a brother. Because whatever you may say, I think Henry Costa has the potential to be a superior man. I'm not saying he isn't right now. I still think he's a work in progress. Like all of us that are coming into our own at this point in our nation's history, we are all, forging ourselves to arrive at a solid place of love for country and progress. So I think he has it within him to be a superior man. I'll just remark on a few things he raised and offer some advice to him as a brother, especially as he goes forward, tonight to sit with the other brother, Stanton Witherspoon, who they are having, a one-on-one interaction. So when folks continue to argue, nothing has happened. Nothing has happened. Just last week, 1.8 billion HPX deal presented to the National Legislature for ratification. As you all may know, what is ratification? It's the process by which the legislature, in the exercise of its function of oversight, of approving these kinds of investment. This is a massive investment deal, in case you don't know. The HBS deal is a massive investment deal. 1.8 billion coming to our country under the watch of the president. I remember when that deal was announced a couple of months ago and the memorandum of understanding was signed. As usual, the naysayers are out there. Oh, it's a bunch of bollocks. This isn't true. This is nonsense. Nothing is happening and nothing will come out of it. That's what they kept saying. Even up to today's day, they kept repeating that refrain that nothing was happening and the HBX deal was a hoax. That was some of the things they said. Today, as we stand, and I haven't seen the deal yet, I'm hoping that I will get the opportunity to see a copy of the deal so that we can go into the merits of the deal and share the merits and share some of the things that are going to happen in our country as a consequence of this deal. $1.8 billion deal is now sitting before our legislators for ratification, for approval, so that they go through it, unpack it, make some suggestions and changes, ensure that the country's interest is protected, and pass it into law. And when it's passed into law, it can move into fruition. Now, some people have argued that there may be marginal benefits to the country. How can there be marginal benefits when you have an investment deal of 1.8 billion? I just saw, even as this deal is going to the legislature, HPX have put up a call for those small business owners in the area of catering. They put out a call for small business owners in the area of logistics. They put out a call for small business owners in the area of construction, in the area of engineering and mining. 5 separate calls have been issued by HPX, even as this deal now is going to the legislature for ratification, for small business owners, Liberian-owned businesses, to bid for contracts that they will implement at the local level in our country, consistent with this HPX intervention and investment. Now, of course, business is what powers the economy. Those of our colleagues who run companies, who invest their time in their catering business, providing food services, the restaurants, companies that do that, companies that are into logistics and infrastructure, companies that are into engineering. Most of our brothers who have left the technical colleges are running companies in our country today. Illustrious young men. HPX has now put out those call for all of them to participate as a derivative effect of the deal, 1.8 billion, that now sits at the Liberian legislature. And somebody wants to tell me that nothing has happened in our country and nothing is happening. By any means, look, we've said this. We're not saying that, the country is perfect, and nobody should even expect the country to be perfect at this point in time. Absolutely not. But to argue that nothing has changed is to be oblivious or deliberately oblivious to the good that is coming to our country. 1.8 billion now in investment now sits at your legislature, and SPX is now putting up bids for local Liberian businesses. That is some of the changes that come into the country, and these are the improvements in the business environment that we can expect to see. Of course, what will be the derivative effects when Liberian businesses get these deals. The woman who runs her catering company will get income, therefore she creates jobs for the other young women and men who work with her to prepare the food, to transport the food, to deliver the food, catering business. They are all going to get jobs. They are going to get paid. And when they get paid, they take that income home and they support their families. They put their children in school. They're going to expand. Depending on the size of the contract, these people are going to recruit other people, bring them on board to provide additional services, and people get more jobs in the country, generating jobs for Liberia. How can you say that is nothing? Construction. The low-level constructions associated with this deal that goes to Liberian companies. You all know most of our energetic young men are in the informal sector. Some of them are bricklayers, they are plumbers, they are electricians in different areas, masons, all of that. When construction companies get these contracts and they are able to recruit other Liberians, especially in the Leeward areas, around the areas, the rural parts where this company is going to be functioning, these people are going to get opportunity to earn income and support their families. How can you say that this is nothing? $1.8 billion under HPX before the legislature. Now I'm hoping in the coming weeks to get a copy. I've reached out to those concerned to get a copy of the HPX deal so that we can unpack it in some detail so the Liberian people can see beyond the $1.8 billion figure, what are the practical effects they can expect. But even before we get to that, these are some of the things we are there. I know there were issues with ArcelorMittal around utilizing the rail that was constructed on ArcelorMittal. But again, President Weah, in his foresight and wisdom, understanding that in international business, you must be able to respect the rights of the different players that operate within your economy. It's very key. You got to respect business rights. That's why we have a commercial court, because all of these impact how investment come to your country and they're retained in your country. So President Weah, in his foresight, about 2 or 3 weeks ago, just issued an executive order establishing or re-establishing or extending, I should say, the railway, the Liberia Railway Authority, because that's one of the contentious issues that ArcelorMittal raised about use of the railway. And I think it's a valid issue to raise, given that they invest their money primarily in order to build the rail. But that's why President Weah is a wise person. And he passed the executive order establishing the rail authority so that the country where the rail exists, Liberians can manage that rail authority in partnership with experienced people and ensure that access is granted to both ArcelorMittal and to HPX so that the monopoly is not created. That's what leadership does. You increase the players on the market, but you ensure that the rights of all of these players are also respected. But also, ultimately, who do you owe fidelity or fiduciary responsibility to? You owe that to the country. And that's what President Weah has done. HPS 1.8 billion. The rail is coming. Even the construction and the revitalization of the rail is going to lead to an increase in jobs, and therefore is going to have a derivative effect on the people of Liberia. This is happening under President Weah. Somebody say nothing is happening. Secondly, just at the spring meetings, less than a week ago, I will keep this information very current, not to be repetitive, because every week I outline areas where new investment is coming, positive things are happening in our country, what government is doing, because again, I'm not a portfolio person. All I want to see is that I owe a responsibility to President Weah, and I'm going to amplify the gains under his watch so that people in Liberia and the diaspora begin to see that things are actually improving and changing in our country, both infrastructurally and as well as within the policy environment. Just a few weeks ago at the spring meeting, Liberia signed a $5.5 million solar deal on the margins of this meeting, led by Minister Gaffwan, who others claim all the time that Mr. Gaffwan is doing nothing. Mr. Gaffwan led that process, along with the head of the LACC, $5.5 million solar deal. Now, what is definitive or distinct about this deal? This $5.5 million deal is a solar deal. As you all know, we have LEC and the hydro that is being used to power electricity primarily in Montserrat County or in Monrovia and other parts. Then you got the West African power pool through Cote d'Ivoire that supplies other areas of the country, namely Nimba, Grand Jede, and other countries as well. And that's why you see they affect the environment in different ways. But the solar deal is depending on solar power. So what you get from solar power is a level of sustainability. As long as you have the daylight, you can sustain solar power in your country. 5.5 million deal just signed a couple of weeks ago at the spring meeting. You can Google it. Solar power deal. Just put Minister Gaffar, Minister of Finance and Development Planning, LEC, solar power deal. Put that into Google right now and you will get the results. Because everything I say here, Mr. Austin Solo, I know you're trying to distract us, but it's not even going to work. You know, I'm always concentrated. These petty interventions don't move me. Everything I say here can be verified and fact-checked. I spoke about the $1.8 billion deal that is submitted to the legislature. Go Google it, fact-check it. It is there. I'm not telling you about 5.5 million solar deal that is going to power at least 6,900 homes across the Republic of Liberia. Was just signed. In terms of sustainability, because it is based on solar, it therefore means that over a long period, people can continue to benefit. And that is happening under the watch of President Weah, recently signed again. Then let's talk about the Starlink partnership that was just signed recently with, no, I got to talk to him so he understands that I can see him, but it's not having any effect. So it's a waste of his time. Whether it's his name or it's a fake profile, I want him to understand that it's a waste of his time. All right. The Starlink deal that was just signed by the Liberia Telecommunications Authority. We all know what Starlink is. Starlink now is the premier service provider across the world when it comes to internet connectivity. It's a company headed by Elon Musk, who I don't know if he's still the richest person in the world, but one of the most, illustrious tech, professionals on the planet Earth, Starlink. And now the Liberia Telecommunications Authority has entered a deal with Starlink. About 300,000 plus deal, if I'm not mistaken. And in that deal, for the very first time in the history of our country, 156 public schools across the 15 counties of the Republic of Liberia. Just divide 156 by 15. It will tell you the amount of public schools per counties are going to now benefit from high-speed internet at these particular schools across the country. Never happened before. And you and I can talk about the ripple effect of internet productivity. When you have access to internet, number one, output of our students are going to increase because now they have the access to do research, to have opportunity to access online libraries, real-time access to learning materials as well comes with the exposure to internet. It also gives them exposure to information very readily. And when they have information, it increases their ability to participate in our democracy in a very active and informed manner. And you have that happening as well. Needless to talk about even teachers doing research and providing very current opportunities or learning materials to our students. This deal was just was just signed about 2 weeks ago. Each of those schools are going to have a whole Starlink setup at all of them. Irrespective of how far-flung and rural that school may be, access to Starlink is going to be made available to each of them. This is happening under President Weah. Again, I said, don't take my word for it. Go and fact check it. When you fact check it, the results are there. It's all online because this was signed quite recently, all online. And people tell us that nothing is changing in the country. How can we be so hypocritical and wicked to our own country because we don't want to tell the true stories of our country for political reasons? We're not going to do that. We're going to explain exactly what is happening in the country so that people out in the diaspora understand that this is a quest that is happening at a point in time where we want to see the best for our country. And we got to move beyond that. That's what the centrism movement that I founded in collaboration with other colleagues, professional colleagues, that is our dedication. That we want to pioneer a different kind of politics that is about moving the country forward. That is about recognizing good. That is not about combative, antagonistic, mindless politics, but it's about celebrating what is good in the country. Starlink going to 156 schools, 15 counties, internet connectivity. First time in the history of our country. And you say nothing is happening. Well, let's also talk about the policy environment. On the policy environment, just the recent U.S. climate report, that was put out. Liberia's economy is growing. And now I know there are those, when you talk about the economy growing, they say, oh no, these IMF and World Bank reports, we can't depend on them. Yes, to some extent, reports are there and people want to feel the real-time impact, but these track changes that you will feel over a period. So they are changing and improving. For example, our economy grew to 5.1%. It is there in that report if you can check it out. All right. Then also on the side of inflation, 7.7% decline from 10% of inflation. Now, when you take those two things aside from the wordings, what do they actually mean for our country and the economy? If you recall, the price of rice recently came down. The price of oil came down. The price of basic commodities came down. They may not have been a drastic reduction, especially for those of you who are well off and swimming in luxury. So you dismiss those kinds of investment. But ultimately, for the poorest of the poor in our country, even if $100 decrease in the price of rice is significant to them, it is because the economy grew, as well as because inflation was brought down by 3 digits under this government, under the leadership of President Weah. And people argue that nothing is changing. For example, corruption. We grew by 10 places on the corruption barometer, which means that in terms of the perception and the management of corruption, this year we improved by 10 steps, which means that incremental steps are being taken to address that. How does these reports arrive at this positioning when people say nothing is happening? Now, some may claim that this isn't enough, but I would say to you, look, if you look at the actions that President Weah has taken against people who supported him and brought him to the presidency because of malfeasance in government over the last 2 years, you can definitely see that he's very much serious about fighting graft in our country. More than 15 officials of government have been either suspended, relieved of their posts, reprimanded by President Weah, simply, but now I shouldn't say simply, because they were alleged to be involved in acts of corruption. That is why we have grown by at least 10 places on the corruption barometer, because his leadership demonstrates that there's a seriousness, a renewed seriousness towards attacking corruption. Are we saying that all is rosy and all is well in our country? By no stretch. We have challenges, we have struggles, and they're going to persist and remain there. But are things changing? Indeed, they are changing. And with that, I've just picked out these 4 areas to raise so that you see that gradually things are improving. We're not where we want to be, but we certainly are not where we were before. There is progress. And my role as a centrist and all of those who ascribe to centrism ideology is that we are here to celebrate that which is changing our country. On that note, I'd like to speak to 1 or 2 things that were raised by my brother Henry Costa in his most recent podcast, in which he addressed the president on some pressing concerns, as he called them, regarding the governance of the state. And as you all know, Henry Costa has been one who is always forthright and robust in the airing of his views regarding issues of governance. It has never been one to shy away from engagement. But at this point in time, I just want to offer some very sober and brotherly, coming from a very good place, advice to my brother Henry Costa. Because we are all maturing. And I say we because those of us who belong to the generation, like I said, of the early 40s, going upwards to the mid 40s, thereabouts, we are all maturing in a certain way alongside our country. And we should get to a place where we begin to understand governance from a macro framework and not from isolated frameworks. There are still very much entrenched rent-seeking interests in our country that would rather have the country collapse because of their private interest than to see the country move forward. I do not for one believe that President Weah belongs to that group, that narrow confines of those who are rent-seeking and extractive and who want to ride and live in wealth on the backs of poor people. I don't think he belongs to that group. I believe he means well, like I've said. And I maintain that that is my disposition. But, Brother Costa, you have to be very careful so that you don't get used either directly or indirectly by these interests to undermine. As you said in your podcast, you fought very hard to bring President Weah to power. It is 2 years in his reign, especially given the history of how your support to President Weah ended when you took a U-turn, which you attempted to justify to the Liberian population and came to support us at the CDC in the dying days of the elections. When you did that, I would say now is not the time to be used by these actors who have different interests, private interests, other than the proper functioning of governance to benefit poor people. That's my exhortation to you, Brother Costa. I urge you to exercise patience. I urge you to become circumspect. I urge you to be more discerning. You and I spoke a couple of months ago when we were in Liberia, when you were there. And we had some private conversations. And we remarked on certain things and mistakes that you and I have made in this journey to where we are today. Today we have a grandfather who leads the country, and he means well, because you can see that. I can see that. And a lot of Liberians can see that. Do not allow yourself to be used towards the unraveling of what this president is doing at this point in time on the basis of a subterfuge that something is wrong and that people are exploiting him. Don't do that. I know you're going on Spoon FM today. You're going to have that conversation with Stanton. And the whole idea is to be fiery and robust, and they will pander to your ego by raising issues like, oh, where is the previous Henry Costa? He is now a coward. He doesn't speak truth to power. Why isn't he criticizing President Weah? Let them criticize him. They got mouths too. They got Facebook pages. If they have the moral temerity and grounds to criticize the president, then let them go and do it. I have been on record to say, when you are an insider, as you are, and you refer to President Weah as your uncle, and you as his nephew, when you remark publicly that you meet the president and you have conversations with the president, I don't have that privilege. I mean, I just met him quite recently. I can say that I have an ongoing relationship where I can just go and see the president. But you have said that, and you have that relationship. When you have that relationship with somebody, it's the same thing I said to somebody, and you are in government, like I was in government. My role is not to come outside and behave like an advocate. Because when you do that, what it means, what it says to a lot of people is you're simply trying to present yourself as better than the other people who are in government. And no matter the moral currency of what you may bring to that conversation, you are going to be second guessed and people are going to brand you. And I believe rightfully so. Because when you have access to the president, the governor of the state, it is an opportunity and a privilege to be able to utilize that access to feedback and advise and consistently do so. But when you leave that and come to the public with the intent of excluding yourself from that arrangement, then it sounds or it appears to be hypocritical. And Brother Costa, I don't think you're a hypocrite. And so you shouldn't be used by other people. So it seems like you are a hypocrite. Don't do that. Don't allow them to do that. That's why the other day, on Spoon, when the issue was raised with Senator DeLon about the job issue, which others have wanted to spin and say that I'm not interested in Liberian jobs. How can I, Kanio Bai Gbala, not be interested in Liberian people getting jobs? I am very much interested in Liberian people getting jobs. But what I'm wary of is advocacy born out of hypocrisy that attempts to make you look good and make others look bad. In your podcast, you asserted that Senator DeLon and Senator Kanga are responsible for the current Minister of Justice being in that position. If that is true, which I don't know because I wasn't there, you are an insider of the UP Alliance, the Rescue Alliance, you know about all of these conversations, that happened before. But if that is true, then Senator DeLon has way more influence and access than he is allowing the public to believe. And therefore, when he goes on the floor of the Senate, instead of utilizing his access he has to inform changes, but goes on air and on video to criticize a fellow minister of a government, he is only doing so because he wants to make himself look like he is the advocate. And when you get into government, especially as a functionary, holding a title, your role is tailored towards changing things that are happening, not by appearing to be an advocate. And that's what I come to you. Now, let's look at the substance of your argument. You argue, and again, I don't know the justice minister from a bag of chips. I mean, it's not that I don't know him. If I were to see him and I wouldn't recognize him or speak to him or interact with him, I believe he and I have seen each other before. He probably may recognize me. I mean, he is more known than I am in the country and more revered in our profession than I am. So I don't expect him to know me, but I do know him and know of him. But beyond that, there is no other relationship that I have with the Minister of Justice. And I just think it's important to put that there as I start to make these comments. No, I have absolutely no relationship with him. But I think it is patently wrong, knowing the legal framework of our country now, or at least I expect that you will know the legal framework of our country now, to start to blame the Minister of Justice for prosecution of corruption. In 2022, which I believe are one of the major steps that President Weah, took while he was president in terms of the fight against corruption. The Anti-Corruption Act, the act creating the Liberia Anti-Corruption Commission, was restated and taken to Parliament. It is in that act, in terms of changing the framework of fighting corruption, that commissioners appointed to the LACC receive what I call embedded tenure. They have tenure. You cannot remove them. You must go to Parliament in order to remove them under the 2022 law that created the LACC. In addition to that, that law gave the LACC the right to manage the affairs of asset declaration and to institute sanctions for those who fail to follow asset declaration provisions. In addition, the law, for the very first time in the history of our country, gave the LACC the right to prosecute directly all acts of corruption. Before, the LACC used to share that role with the Minister of Justice. Now, that role is fully resident in an LACC that enjoys tenure as opposed to the Minister of Justice. The Minister of Justice does not enjoy tenure. The president can wake up in the morning tomorrow and say, Minister of Justice, you dismissed. The president cannot wake up tomorrow with all cause and say to LACC, any one of the commissioners, not just the chair or the vice chair, any one of the commissioners, the president cannot just wake up and tell them, you've been fired. There is a whole process that must outline costs and eventually get to Parliament before you can remove a single commissioner from the LACC based on the 2022 Act as it exists today. So who is responsible to fight corruption? It is the Liberia Anti-Corruption Commission. Are they protected and insulated by the law that created them now? Absolutely. The president cannot remove them. So they have the independence to do their work. It is not the Minister of Justice. Yes, justice still has other statutory functions, prosecuting other crimes, criminal acts. But those that fall within the ambit of corruption, the primary repository for attacking and to dealing with acts of corruption is the Liberia Anti-Corruption Commission. So your crusade is misplaced. You cannot blame the Minister of Justice for a lack of prosecution. And recently when I listened to Councillor Zoe, when she was at the Ministry of Information, she outlined what I consider to be tremendous progress in the fight against corruption. People just think investigating and fighting corruption is a child's play. I was there for 2.5 to 3 years. I was appointed, like I said before, when I left the UNDP in 2020 and I resigned from the LACC in 2023. I know what happens in the LACC and how difficult it is to fight corruption and how some of us came under attack internally. These are things we have not even spoken about. Some of the issues that happen regarding us and our engagement with our jobs at the LACC did not come from the opposition. It came from people within our own government, within our own party, based on positions that we took. Some of which were simply saying, let's declare our assets. So when I see Councillor Zoe going to the Ministry of Information and outlining some of the progress that has been made in terms of investigation, in terms of prosecution, in terms of securing indictments for accusations of corruption, I am reminded that that environment is made possible because of President Weah. If President Weah did not have a disposition to have an open government where LACC commissioners can go and have press conferences to lead where they're going, it would never happen. The same thing I said when our brother, who you agree with me is outstanding and is doing a very fantastic job at the GSC, Ganswai Jackson. When he released that report on the debt, and he continues to release these reports, if the political environment was not receptive, which I believe comes from the president and the presidency, it would never have happened. The reason it is happening is because you have a receptive environment for it to happen. Will prosecution occur? Can they occur? I absolutely believe so. But it takes time. It takes effort. Not from the Minister of Justice primarily, but from the Liberia Anti-Corruption Commission. Because statutorily, per the 2022 Act, it is they with the mandate to lead and to fight corruption. So, Brother Costa, your advocacy is misplaced. Respectfully, it is misplaced. And I want to believe you actually mean well. But if this is the basis of the advocacy, then, like I said, you are moving in the wrong direction, because that advocacy is not supposed to be tailored to the Minister of Justice. The second thing I will say in that respect, having dealt with the question of mandates, legal mandates, not the Minister of Justice, act of corruption, go to LACC. You claim that rescuers are angry at the president, increasingly becoming angry at the president, because the Minister of Justice is sabotaging the fight against corruption. Like I said, it's not his primary mandate. The mandate is with the LACC. Before 2022, it used to be with the Ministry of Justice. That has changed. It is now with the LACC. So that argument and that anger is misplaced. The other issue to address, Brother Costa, is this idea of consistently holding the president responsible, especially when you have a group that is tenured. The president is responsible because, the LACC is taking time. No. Like I said, if the president did not create the enabling environment that now exists, these other reports we see coming out will not be happening. the indictments that you see coming out of grand jury at the court will not be happening. And as the other reports come out, that's when the LACC is supposed to step in and commence investigations in that regard, not the Ministry of Justice. The Ministry of Justice has no mandate to investigate acts of corruption as of now under the 2022 Restated Act of the LACC. Ministry of Justice can collaborate, can be called upon to assist with prosecutors, but that mandate resides with the LACC. So I believe your issue is misplaced. And so therefore, I come to the core of the message I want to share with you, Brother Costa. You, unlike me, were very central until the last moment in bringing President Boyka to power. You and others, like Stanton Witherspoon and others, fought to make President Boyka president because you saw in him the idea that he could do well for our country. Those of us who come from the CDC, because we are party individuals and we're off the government, we took our own position, and because we didn't know President Boyka, and we supported our side. Now President Boyka is president. Less than 2 years in his mandate, it seems, and I stand to be corrected, or it appears, and I stand to be corrected, that you people who engendered his presidency are very quickly becoming frustrated. I think it is unfair to the president. I think the timing, I think given the length of time he has served as president, I think in the public policy environment, the things that are required to instill change based on all of those, I believe that it is unfair to reach the conclusions that you guys are reaching now about the president. But as for to you particularly, Brother Costa, given the trajectory of what transpired in 2023 and how you left and now you are back, I will urge you to be circumspect, to discern, to exercise discernment, to reflect, to introspect, to ask yourself deeply, to meditate about the course of action you want to take at this point in time. For me, I've done that. I've done that. And that's why, no matter the kinds of names that are called, appellations labeled against me, I've not moved. I'm absolutely unmoved because I have done the deep thinking already. And I prepare myself, for this position, for this battle going forward. I'm solid in that respect. Mentally, physically, ideologically, psychologically, I am ready and prepared. And my support for the president will not waver. Come hell or high water, is never going to waver. It's important for you to put yourself in that position. I have done so. All right? And that's where I'm at now, doing what I do. The other day, and I digress a little. Recently, we had news in the country of this agreement to bring Kilma Garcia from the U.S. And if you ask me, Madam Sarah Baslow, a professional of more than 20 years in the UN, solid woman who has been doing very, very well in terms of putting Liberia back on the map diplomatically. Nowadays, we are not getting faux pas and gaffes from the international community. We are rather getting plaudits and applause from the international community. We are winning UNSC seats while competing against countries that are far greater than us because of the level of diplomatic efforts being deployed by Madam Sarah Baslow. Under Madam Baslow, we have a UNSC seat. This woman just met the Secretary of State of the U.S., Marco Rubio. Our president was privileged to be selected among 6 to meet with President Trump and to articulate the vision of Liberia of wanting to work with the U.S. that is now in the formative stages of bearing fruit for our country. Foreign policy has been top-notch since Sarah Baslow came to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And nobody, even if you're against us, nobody can fault that. Nobody can argue with that. Nobody can introduce any contradictions. Madam Sarah Baso has meant nothing but good news for foreign policy in Liberia since she assumed the role of minister. And recently, part of her interactions with the U.S., who we have bilateral relationships with, who are our long-standing partner in development, has been with Liberia since the formation of our country up to now, has been a guarantor of our peace, culturally, socio-culturally. You are a resident of the U.S., Mr. Brother Costa. Many Liberians fled to the U.S. during the war, still live there, and are the mainstay, the economic mainstay of a majority of our people back home today through remittances, benefiting from the American economy and American education. All of us, most of us, who claim to know anything or something, benefited from the American system. This is the United States of America that looked at Liberia and said, look, we want to have a deal with you to take this person under international law, which, by the way, I teach at the University of Liberia at the law school. Countries are allowed to enter into bilateral arrangements based on mutual interests. And therefore, our country, looking at it from a mutual interest perspective, agreed that if it were to get to that point, they would be happy to host Kilma Garcia to come to Liberia. That is what was agreed. And some people jump out, oh, the country is going down the drain. They are bringing a gang member. But then I ask people in our country, where is your moral compass? Where is your moral compass? You claim to be angry at Kilma Garcia, a single person coming to our country for refuge based on international norms and bilateral arrangements with our long-standing partner, the U.S. Yet you have a miscreant, to borrow the words of Alvin Wisse, of the highest order in the person of Yeke Koluba, parading and masquerading the halls of the legislature, a human rights violator, I form an ex-combatant, the worst reprobate in our country, walking around, and you are not afraid, but you are afraid of Garcia. That's why when that puppet opened his mouth the other day talking about he was threatening me on some TV, I just laughed at Yeke. Yeke, the reason why you have the ability to threaten people like us and you think it will mean something to us is because the society has tolerated your kind. Not even tolerated, celebrated. May you have represented twice. I know District 10 and O Road, the good people of District 10 who live on O Road, upstanding individuals who send their children to school, and they sit there and allow you to be representative. That is why you have the audacity to threaten people like us. But the point I'm making is that this diplomatic position of the country, those who claim now that they so care about Liberia, that is so moral about Liberia, can tolerate somebody who is documented in his history by his own admission about the things he's done. Let the SOD in our country beat people's children up. Human rights violations upon human rights violation. He admits them publicly. Goes to parliament, behaves like some kind of underage child, disrupting session, insulting presidents and their wives and their mothers all around the place. And he is a representative. And these people want to raise a moral argument about hosting Garcia here. These people got to be joking. They got to be joking. And I applaud Madam Baso for the way she's led and continues to lead and to project and position our country in the international community. President Weah did not make a mistake. In fact, it was one of the best decisions he made in selecting her, because for foreign policy purposes, she has been super effective. And maintaining positions with your long-standing partner, and the only superpower in the world today, in case those of you who don't read public international law or geopolitics, is very key towards the stability and the interests, the vital interests of our country. So if you can tolerate Yeke, a social reprobate of the West order, and you can reward him to be a legislator, which I believe, I don't think the people of Oro will be, and District 10 will be very stupid this time around to elect a Yeke again. Because if it were to happen, then I'll know that Liberia is really, really challenged to have a Yeke, in parliament. What is this country going to? And these guys believe, Yeke believes he has a platform. He sits in spaces and chooses to insult other people. The other day he saw me, he started laughing. In fact, that the new name I've taken, he called me a Kobo lawyer. Now I'm calling myself Kobo lawyer because at least, my Meridian Kobo is sweet. So even when I plead for them, and at the end of the day, I can get some brown beans and red oil, and I will eat it. I'll be happy. And they will celebrate me because I'm doing something for poor people in our country. So yeah, I'm a Kobo lawyer. But I'm not a human rights abuser. All right? I did not terrorize people. I'm not a drug addict. I've not enabled drug addiction in my country. I'm not giving safe passage to drug dealers. All right? I have a character and a reputation, Yeke. Unlike you. Like I continue to say, the accident that landed you at the legislature is still mind-boggling. And we entertain people like Yeke, but when serious decisions are taken on behalf of the country, then people want to question the motives when we have professionals like Madam Bezo leading our country. And Yeke and others want to run around here because of political reasoning, and people are clapping. Yeke should be booed. In any public space that he chooses to open his mouth to insult people of high standing, he should be booed. And if those of you who are afraid of Yeke, I have taken it upon myself that any attempt for Yeke that I hear about, that he comes against anybody of standing, Yeke will hear from me. A fool like Yeke, a reprobate like Yeke, somebody, a drug addict like Yeke, a human rights violator like Yeke, that I should be. Liberia is interesting. But I digress because this thing just overtook me. I'm fast running out of time today. I've covered the key things that I wanted to cover, which is principally that good things are happening in our country. And we have to be patient to begin to benefit from the good things. And at the centrist movement, our role is to amplify the good things. Those who want to deal with the bad things, let them deal. That's their job. My job, as I've committed to the president, and I've committed in my own heart by myself, is to support the president in his quest for change in our country by showcasing all of these good things that are happening. And my call to you, Brother Costa, as I end, my call to you, I know how to talk plenty. Like I say, I come here, I take 1 hour, I say what I have to say, and and I get off. But my call to you, Brother Costa, do not allow yourself to be used. Do not allow yourself to be used. Oh, Jay said, who is Yeke? Jake, you say Yeke coming for me? Yeah. You don't even know. Y'all be fooling Yeke in our country. But I know 2029 will be the end of Yeke's foolishness. Let me come back to my brother Costa. I'm saying to you, Brother Costa, how we can say it back, we can say it, right? Don't allow somebody to use your hand to take fire coal from in the coal pot. Those who want to take the fire coal, let them put their own hand there. Let them put their hands there. Let them man up and woman up and come out and state the positions they want. They don't have to use you. So as you go on Spoon today, I call upon you as a brother with the best of intentions. The president deserves your support. Especially like the way you said, given the way you left. And you came back and he was magnanimous, gratuitous. Like I recounted how he accepted me. For me, I think you and our cases are different because for you, you were with him and you left him. For me, I was on the other side. And I fought with my side until the battle ended. We were whipped And I said, look, I'm going to support him. And that's what I'm doing now. You, on the other hand, you left him. Now you've come back. Stay where you are, Brother Costa. Don't sour that relationship. Don't allow yourself to be misinterpreted. Don't allow people to ascribe things to you. You will go on that show tonight, you will say A, and people will turn your A into B. They will interpret it for themselves. And you will sour a father-son relationship that you are struggling now to rebuild. Don't do it, my brother. Go for your show. Have your conversation with Stanton. And you know Stanton can be very provocative in terms of the questions he can ask, the things he will say. You don't want to be even complicit just by being in that space and agreeing to certain things that he may say. Because you could be complicit just by that, even not by what you say. So, my dear brother, I'm saying to you, don't allow yourself to be used. I'll end on this note. At the Liberia Political Centrism Movement, which I founded and lead, and I've had the distinct honor of having smart people from all walks of life on our steering committee, our diaspora team currently working so hard, our secretariat, who can look at us and say, look, there's a vision here of a better Liberia, Kanio, and irrespective of where you come from politically or otherwise, or whatever your imperfections may be, we will support what it is because we all believe in similar ideology. At the centrism movement, our disposition is that let the country move forward. Let the country succeed. Criticisms must be grounded in advice to change things for the better. Not just to pull down and destroy, but to change things for the better. That's why for us, when we offer criticisms, it comes in the form of recommendations for change, not to showcase, the bad about our country. And that's why we are growing. We are growing by the numbers. We're planning our launching for November. November, we're going to formally launch the movement. We have our page on Facebook. If you're interested in joining us in projecting that which is positive about the country, you can go to the Liberia Political Centrism Movement. If you just type it in Facebook and just send a message, someone will be there to speak to you. Better still, if you just send me a message of how you can be a part, we'll incorporate you and we can all begin to work for a successful and better Liberia. Let us not be angry losers. Let us not be angry because we are not the ones in authority. Let us not be angry because, I see these other people, they are the ministers, I'm not the minister today, so therefore I'm mad. This is the process of living. So we must go beyond the personal and want to see the best for our country. That's what we should do. So I'm calling on you, my brother, and all of you out there, if you feel like this is an ideology you can identify with, country first, political parties second, good news first, bad news down the line, the positive first, negativity behind, progress first, retrogression at the back. If you believe this is something that resonates with you, then the centrism movement is the place you want to be, because Liberia is all we have. And so on that note, I'd like to thank you again for doing me the honor of spending this short period of time with us to talk about that which is happening in our country. Like I said, good things are happening. Good news continues to come. And I have appointed myself, this Kokbo lawyer has appointed himself unofficially as his own Minister of Information for President Weah. Somebody say you JMB blogger. I say yes. The assignment is greater than the rank. I am blogging for a great man. I'm blogging for a good reason, and that is about moving our country forward. So if you think this is something you would like to do, reach out to us, send us a message on Facebook, and we'll take the conversation from there. On that note, thank you so very kindly for your time and for your patience. And we'll talk again next week, Sunday around the same time, the Centrism Dialogues, moving the country forward, keeping the narrative positive, and celebrating that which is good and great about our country. Bye-bye.